Now we are going to discuss the election results. Political analyst Ross Feingold is joining us from Taipei to discuss the results in Australia. Ross, thank you so much for joining us here on A News once again. Well, let's start by talking about the Albanese's second term. He made it to the term, and we were actually talking about the election being quite important for the young people. So what do we have from the ballots right now? What do we see? How do we interpret the situation?
It's clear that just as in Canada, the association of the opposition leader, a conservative, with Trump or Trump-style rhetoric on issues such as immigration and other issues as well, really backfired with the electorate. So we see that the incumbent left-of-center leader retained power. That happened in Canada recently, and now it's happened in Australia as well. Although the voters are looking at issues locally, such as cost of living and affordability crisis, you can't separate these election results from the overall global political and economic environment. It certainly was an embarrassing loss for Australia's Liberal Party. They had led earlier in the polls. It seemed that the voters were fed up with the most recent 3 years of leadership under the Labour Party. But the results showed that they didn't want a leader to take over who was too closely associated with Trump.
Well, as you know, Anthony Albanese, as we are talking about, secured a landslide victory in the Australian elections, as he will continue to become the country's prime minister. Now we should talk about the major policies behind his success and in this election. Do you think that he's going to shift into being something else, or is he going to continue as it is? What would you say?
I think he'll continue his policies. He certainly can say that he's won a mandate. His party has control of the lower house of the Australian Parliament, and he can continue to pursue the policies that he's been pursuing. When it comes to the United States, he sought a good relationship with the United States, whether that's former President Biden or new President Donald Trump. He's certainly committed to the AUKUS nuclear-powered submarine program that was entered into when President Biden was in President Biden's first year in office in 2021. And on trade, he's seemed to want to kind of restore relations with China. I think he's conscious of the problems of doing business with China and other China issues that the Western world is angry about, such as human rights issues. But it's also clear that he wants to protect Australia's important exports to China. So he's tried to keep relations on an even level with the Chinese government.
Well, Prime Minister Albanese's government also passed a law called Online Safety Amendment in late 2024, banning children younger than 16 years to own a social media account for the certain platforms. Tell us more about the landmark decision.
It's certainly something that industry doesn't like, because it puts responsibility on industry to police who the users are and put in place certain systems to ensure that the users are above the age level that's mandated under the law. And it's not a surprise that a left-of-center government would try to do something like this. Left-of-center governments typically support more of a state intervention approach in various issues. And for better or worse, it's now the law of the land. And clearly, it did not hurt the Labour Party at the election, or did not hurt Prime Minister Albanese, because he won with such an overwhelming new mandate. So that is the law, and the tech industry is going to have to live with that. It'll be interesting to see if other countries adapt similar measures.
Well, in such uncertain times when the United States is targeting countries with tariffs and tensions remain high in South Asia between India and Pakistan and a rising China, how will Prime Minister Albanese navigate through these challenges in the months ahead?
It's a great question, because so much of that really is based on Australia's relationship with the United States and what kind of security relationship they want. We have the Quad, which brings together Japan, the United States, Australia, and India. It's not a formal treaty. It's certainly not a defense treaty, but it is a grouping for leadership meetings, ministerial meetings. So it remains to be seen how much faith Donald Trump wants to put into the Quad or how much effort. I think he'll get some pressure from his foreign policy and national security team to continue with the Quad as a periodic platform for leadership meetings. So that's something to watch out for. I don't think Australia is looking to carve out its own leadership role with these issues. I think it will defer to the United States, even though Prime Minister Albanese will probably deny that. He'll probably say that Australia makes its own foreign and security policies in the Indo-Pacific region. But I think ultimately he's still going to defer to the United States.
Well, lastly, what would you say about the election itself? Do you think it was expected for Albanese to win over, or was it kind of a shock for the Australia and the rest of the world?
It's probably a bit of a shock because the Conservatives, the Liberal Party, have been polling ahead. And as I said, Australia does have, similar to Canada, does have an affordability crisis. People are concerned about the rising cost of housing, the rising cost of food. There's still some lingering after effect towards politicians with regard to measures put in place during COVID. And Australia certainly had very strict measures under Prime Minister Albanese. But when it comes to the United States imposing tariffs on friendly countries, it seems that the voters have wanted to stay with the steady hand and with the current leadership. And we saw that in Canada, and we saw that again in Australia. So now it's up to Prime Minister Albanese to make a deal with the United States when it comes to trade.
Well, Ross, thank you so much for sparing your time and answering my questions. And thank you so much for joining us here on A News.
Thank you.
Now let's continue with yet another election. Singapore. Singapore's ruling People's Action Party has secured